In this episode, I sit down with Corey Carpenter, an anesthesiologist by trade and longtime client of Living Wealth, who has gone through a total transformation financially over the past 5 years. From being overworked and burned out to adopting the empire over retire mindset and building a life that he doesn't have to retire from. I'm Nate. I make sense out of money. This is Dollars and Nonsense. If you follow the herd, you will be slaughtered. Hey, Corey. It's so awesome to have you on the show. How are you doing, man?
Doing great, Nate. Thanks for having me. I've spent many hours with you on your podcast listening to you, so it's great to be with you in person today.
Yeah, it's gonna be a great time. And you're the one for the listeners who actually was the first one to introduce me to the book Antifragile. By the way, you're the one who says, Nate, I read this book Antifragile, by Mr. Taleb or whatever it is, and you're like, it's really changed my outlook on life and money. And I was like, okay, I got to get this book. And so I read it, and that's what spawned a lot of, the barbell investing strategy and all of this that came from that book. And it really connected with me. But I also give that with a disclaimer. I think you would too, Corey, that, hey, the Antifragile book, maybe if there was a Cliff Note version, most people should read it that way. Like if there was an Antifragile for dummies or something like that, maybe they should go for that.
I'm totally shocked that you actually read it. I thought you might glance at it and be like, no, it's too long. But I'm a captive audience. When I'm at the hospital for hours on end at night, I have plenty of time to read between cases. So I tried to use that time for something positive. So that was a great book.
It is a great book if you're not faint of heart, because it can be a slog to get through sometimes. Like I would essentially read maybe 2 or 3 pages and I have to stop and like really process, like, this was really good. I have to sit here and take a break and process what I'm actually learning here, because there's too much. It's just a nonstop flow of insight and wisdom, but it's not for the faint of heart. So anyway, that was really cool. I think we'll talk about that in a little while too, Corey, as we kind of go through your story. And you've been a client, I think, since 2018, 2019, I want to say. So 5-6 years now. And we've had a great time together. And from the outside looking in, I've seen you, from when you showed up to start working with me, mostly a conventional anesthesiologist style of wealth building, formula, you could say. Just everything was polished nicely in the way it should be, to, marinating in this, learning about some new things, going through some life experiences, some burnout experiences that essentially introduce you to a whole new way of living and a whole new way of investing and a whole new way of, a total transformation financially, at least perspective wise, focus wise, life wise, that I think everyone's going to really resonate with. So, I mean, that's what I think we would dive into. But if we could start by just kind of hearing your story, take us back to young Corey and what got you into the medical field, the anesthesiology world, and kind of what you thought you were doing it for, why you were doing it, and just kind of take us through where you were and how you've got to where you're at.
Sure. Just to give you some background of kind of where I came from, my childhood and all that, and what shaped me. My mom was a second grade teacher, very stable income, very dependable, and just great teacher. And she was long term. That was her mindset. She was going to teach, and she was great at it. My dad had a construction company and was had his own business. He ran the business not well at times. We lived through the boom and bust of the construction phases of when the economy's great, things were great in our house. But when the economy was tight, then we've kind of felt that at home as well. So it was kind of a fragile on one hand and a fragile lifestyle growing up that I didn't have that framework to deal with at that time. But I definitely lived through this period of seeing boom and bust and not really understanding it in the time, but seeing how my peers honestly were faithful in tithing through that, and they're faithful in giving, that really shaped me, seeing that despite the up and downs, they were faithful in that. And so that was really influential to me. So I came out of that really going to college, seeking to have a dependable income. I honestly, I didn't want to go through the boom and bust of like my parents. And so I started college thinking I wanted to be a high school football coach and a science teacher. And I got halfway through and I had a friend just talk to me about, hey, I want to be an orthopedic surgeon. Just take the same classes I'm taking. And I was like, and thought about it for a couple of days. And it's funny how some people can have an outsized impact on your life. From that conversation, I was like, well, why not? Why don't I try it? I'm going to take the same classes you take for a couple of years. And if I do well, then I'll continue down that path. And so that led me to medical school, eventually to the anesthesia world. And honestly, all that time, some of those decisions were fear-based. I wanted just stable income. I want to have this stability in my life where I wouldn't have to live through this boom and bust cycle. And which is honestly, it's that segment of my life that has done well. Like that hard work has paid off. Fortunately, it doesn't always pay off, but that has paid off. And um, I think that I grew up with a scarcity mindset where we didn't have a lot, but and we may do, and my parents were faithful with it. But I kind of developed that scarcity mindset going through med school residency, and um, kind of dove right into the day. I kind of drank out of the fire hydrant from Dave Ramsey in residency, and my wife and I had envelopes where we stored our cash, and we were steadily paying off debt and feeling decent about things at that point in time.
I don't know if I've ever met, or it's very rare, just by the way, if I jump in, to meet someone who's gone through medical school and is in residency who does not live with a scarcity mindset. It will, it is, you're not making any money and you're way overworked and you're just trying to keep the ship tied down. Like you're just bolting things down, trying to stay afloat for this, what's a really, it can be a difficult season. But I essentially the scarcity mindset and that when you're going through things, it's almost like a boot camp for life, almost. When you're going through medical school residency and all of that, it's like, it's trying to break you and you're going to have to not be broken. It's like, it's almost like a boot campy style experience so that whenever you're actually in the real world saving people's lives and everyone in this life or death, that they make it difficult to keep people from dying. So it's the same thing. It's kind of like a boot campy experience, but I guess the scarcity mentality and bolting things down that actually can float you through that period of time. And it probably is wise. The issue can be, and I think you would attest to this, and I will tell my own story on this front, that the scarcity mindset that one time kind of protected you betrays you, actually. Whenever it doesn't, whenever you're past that point of boot camp, and you're in more of a successful position, you still have all of these same fears, anxieties, stresses, like those, like your body built up this trauma response to, hey, things are difficult now. We need to be safe. We're going to be safe by essentially adopting the scarcity mindset and pretending like nothing is, or we're never going to have anything. Two, then whenever you actually have some things, you actually live like you don't have anything. And this is why I've pushed back against the Dave Ramsey, live like no one else today so you can live like no one else and live and give like no one else tomorrow. It's kind of this idea like, well, no, if you adopt a scarcity mindset right now, it's actually really hard to get out of it. Even if you don't need it anymore, it turns into this thing that betrays you as opposed to benefits you. So it's just funny. I just wanted to jump in and say, you're like, yeah, I had the scarcity mindset from childhood into, I wanted a safe, secure job. I chose medical field. We're in residency. I adopted it. Essentially, it served you well. And then essentially you're about to end up telling me, I think in the story, when did it stop serving you well? And I think that's where you're going to end up getting to. It's like, when did the scarcity mentality betray you? And
What?
go ahead. Go ahead, by the way. Just, you can jump back in and wherever you want to, by the way, Corey.
Sure. Yeah. I think that it's interesting when you're residency, the scarcity mindset fits because you don't have any time to spend any money. So it's fine. It's pretty easy to have that mindset. But for me, what happened pretty quickly out of residency, I took a job in Chattanooga, Tennessee. 4 years into my practice, a private equity group came and bought my anesthesia practice. I had just been a partner for a year, and this private equity company came and just paid every partner to take over their practice. And so I benefited from that, although I didn't want it to happen and wanted to vote against it, but it was financially beneficial, but long term, it made it more difficult in my practice. But what I think this journey has taught me is that my financial journey has also been a spiritual journey. Also, has been a philosophical journey to deal with whenever it comes, and you filter that through the lens that you've had through your life, and that scarcity mindset. When I got this lump sum, this windfall, it all I wanted to do was hold on to it and not lose it. And I kept thinking like, I don't want to be the fool that loses this that I was given. And that scarcity mindset continued. And so from initially, as I tried to figure out what to do with this windfall, I kind of read and studied and talked to partners, and there was various opinions about just dollar cost averaging into the stock market, and there was, hey, just put it in real estate, or do these different ideas. And I have a friend who's a financial advisor here in Chattanooga, and his philosophy was one that I kind of adopted, and I dollar cost average in the stock market for some of the money, but the other, instead of having a bond allocation, I ended up just buying my first policy in whole life. And I didn't fully understand the infinite banking concept, but it appealed to me, the thought of not going backwards. This portion of my funds is not going to go backwards, and it's going to slowly gain. It's not a risky play. And so that was my initial foray or attempt into whole life. And since then, my thinking has dramatically changed, and my philosophy has changed. And just the thought of, when you frame your financial, the picture that you're looking at for your family, I very much had a siloed framework of, I have money here, I have money here, but I had no concept of a system of it all, how it works together, and even the liquidity or the fluidity of the whole, like how I can pull from it. Like initially, I'm going to put it there and I'm not touching it. I remember when I first talked to you, my biggest question was, Nate, when I get this policy, how much of a dividend can I get by 20 years from now? Like that's how I was. That's my concern was just this basic dividend that I can get. Like, what can I hold on to, or what can I look forward to years from now?
Yeah, and I think that was the conventional anesthesiologist polished box of many people that I've met, was just like, hey, what, we're in retirement planning. So yeah, if I put all this money in, what can I get out? And by the way, that stuff matters, Corey. Like it's perfectly fine to look into that. It matters. There's no question. I do believe that policies produce, one of the, if you like a risk adjusted passive income better than anything. If that makes sense for people. Like if you actually talk about a risk adjusted passive income, and you're trying to actually solve for what produces the highest amount of passive income for the risk that it's in, I really do think whole life will take the cake. But or at least it can fight with anybody. But that's not really the goal of necessarily this conversation per se, to dive into that. But that was correct. And so you started, and you've probably seen, by the way, our 4 stages of IBC presentation, Corey, or at least you've heard me talk about it on the podcast a few times. The idea that you were a really high level saver before you showed up, and this was just a new place to start saving money. At some point, you transitioned into what we more call like the entrepreneur phase of infinite banking, the entrepreneur phase of life in general. But if we could go back 1 second into your story, you had mentioned, you got into residency, you left, and within a few years, or within like a year or two, you had become a partner with an anesthesia group that got bought by private equity. You had this lump sum of money, you're trying to secure it, but you're still working. Now you're not a partner anymore, but you're still working as an anesthesiologist for this new private equity group, correct? So that you transition from an owner to an employee of the group, essentially. Okay. And so as an employee of the firm, how long were you just slaving away as an anesthesiologist? And essentially, we've talked about getting burnt out at some point here, Corey. When did the scarcity mindset, the high income, the slaving away for it, the saving, the storing, like essentially, I like to think of it as you became a slave to the love of saving money. I feel like if that resonates with you, that's what resonated with me too. I actually stopped liking the work as much. I just became a slave to the love of saving money, which is fueled by the scarcity mentality, fueled by it. It's like, hey, but at some point that causes burnout. So take us through that trajectory. You got bought out, you had this money, and you started working really hard, saving as much money as you possibly could. Tell us about that, how that pans out.
Well, Well, it's interesting how that scarcity mindset financially also played itself out. That fear-based mentality was evident in so many aspects of my life. In my anesthesia group, I constantly wanted a seat at the table because I thought, hey, if I don't take this role on, then I may get cut out, or they may not need me if I don't take on this role. So I ended up being in charge of 104 employees, our CRNAs in our group, and recruiting and retaining all these people, and working full time, and being a department chair at a hospital, and just taking on way too many roles. But all that was kind of, again, scarcity mindset, fear based. I better do it because down the road it's going to be important. And so I was building up, doing all the hard work now, thinking that down the road it's going to really pay off. Not really in the moment, not really realizing the toll that it was taking mentally and just physically, just feeling tired all the time, not being as present of a dad or husband as I wanted to be. So I think that it was like one of those things where it doesn't happen all of a sudden. It was slowly, and all of a sudden, 2019 hits, and I'm like, man, I've got to change. Like the uh, the pain of taking so much call, the pain of these time commitments really hit home, and I started thinking, I've learned, financially I'm doing well as far as saving, but my life right now kind of objectively is not fun. So I was kind of hit me hard that I've got to make some changes, and um, part of those changes were spiritual. There's a book that I read called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, and it's got by a guy named Pete Scazzaro, and a friend of mine recommended that book, and it talked about the rhythms of life, and about how when you overwork or you commit to too many things, God made us to follow a natural rhythm, kind of observing the Sabbath, taking a day of rest, taking time with. So I honestly had to be forced to do that. My wife and I had to make like recommitments to, hey, on Sundays I'm not going to work. I'm going to hang with the family. It's just a dramatic change um, in my life from a work standpoint, and it kind of, as I was reading and kind of understanding this whole life infinite banking concept, all this stuff kind of came to a head in 2019. I read Nelson Nash's book, I think in 2018, and I was coming to a greater understanding of how best to use this policy that I've stored up. But at that point, I hadn't deployed any of it. I was still in a mode. And um, so as all this inertia was developing towards change, I sat there. What my son had a baseball lesson, and we were in this business that had just opened up in Chattanooga, and it's called DBAT. It's an indoor baseball and softball hitting facility. And I was looking around at the concept and thinking about it, looking on my phone, like, this is such a cool idea. I wonder where else they have locations. And I went to medical school in Augusta, and they didn't have a location for that franchise there, but they had multiple locations in Atlanta, one location in Chattanooga, and so that sparked a light bulb to go off where I'm like, this may be a way out of the rat race in anesthesia where I'm constantly just having. I'm getting paid hourly pay for working, and I'm going to be stuck in that hamster wheel for the rest of my life if I don't take action. And so that led me to kind of go down this road of how can I implement infinite baking, this concept, to actually utilize it to make my life better now, rather than this finite game of saving up for a nest egg to have a 4% withdrawal rate when I'm 65 years old. All that stuff kind of hit me as like, that's not the game I want to play anymore. I want to play an infinite game, not a finite game of saving up. I think honestly, spiritually, I think God wants me to be more active now rather than storing up all this. If you look at a parable in the Bible about the rich man who built bigger silos to store his wealth, I think in my head I started thinking, is that who I'm becoming, or should I?
It hit that's that same parable hit me the same way, Corey, by the way. The same exact one of the rich man who's become successful and is saying, "I'm gonna build bigger barns, bigger silos to fit all this grain, and then I won't have to work again. We won't have to do anything. We can relax finally. We have all this grain stored up for years and years and years to come." And then Jesus says, "You fool, your life will be, taken from you this evening. And what was all this for?" And I was like, That's me. I was like, yeah. What that I was like, Lord, I know I've been doing that. Like, there's no question. I've been building up. I think actively in my own mind about my barn and how much money's in it and how much security I feel about the grain in my barn. And I think he is trying to, I don't think he minds us having barns with grain in it. I think what he minds is like, where is your heart completely gripped by that? Is your entire reason for waking up every day to fill the barn up with more grain? Is this your life goal? Or is there something deeper at play? And I think that's what you're getting to. So tell me, by the way, with all that to be said, you're going through scripture. Tell me some like practical. You already mentioned one practical thing, like, hey, I'm gonna readjust work schedule. I'm not gonna work on Sundays anymore. That's gonna be, more of like a Sabbath feel to it, a day of rest, a day with family. Was there anything else, like practically speaking, that you made a change as you kind of hit your your midlife existential burnout crisis?
If it feels pretty cliche that like it definitely was a midlife like awareness of this is who I am right now. Is this who I want to remain? This is who I want to be, or is there this abundant life out there that God allows me to seek and be a part of? Which option am I going to take? And I definitely wasn't happy in the current 2019 role that I was playing. I think one thing that I did was I cut back on some of the hats. I took off some of the hats I was wearing. I dropped after a year. I dropped the role of being a CRNA leader, and eventually a year later dropped the being the department chair of anesthesia in a hospital, and really wanted to kind of recommit to being husband, dad, and still a good anesthesiologist and giving 100% to my work because I definitely feel that's a calling I have. But I really had to pull back and recommit to reprioritize how I was living. So one of those, I guess a practical thing is just taking time each day to kind of have a quiet time, just rest and changed. Honestly, I changed so many things. I changed the way I eat. I focused on actually going to bed at a decent hour instead of trying to cramming more work in at night and getting one more thing done. I almost in my mind created an alarm clock for first alarm clocks for when you're going to go to bed. The next one's for when you're going to wake up. And we're not gonna alter those. We're gonna try to stick that as close as possible. So practically, that was kind of what I did is kind of created some margin in my life in order that I could be a better version of myself at that point.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. It's hard to live an abundant life with no margin. That's the truth. Like God created the Sabbath with the idea of margin, but then you see that all throughout Scripture. But I would say this too. So practically speaking, Corey, you nailed a lot of things that you did, and I'm going to ask about like the outcome of those things. So you had said, first off, I'm not working on Sundays. Second off, I'm going to go to bed on time, and I'm going to wake up on the same. I'm going to get sleep. I'm going to start eating better. All of these kind of those things. But on the work side, you said I'm going to take off some hats. That was a big deal. I'm going to take off some hats. I'm going to step out of roles. How did you act? Did you have like financially speaking, was there a benefit to being in those roles that you were going to forego? Or was there more like there wasn't really even a financial benefit to being in those roles? I just felt like it gave me more control. And when I had more control and I felt like I was more, I could control my own outcome by being in those seats. Tell me which angle, maybe it could have been all of them, but like whenever you phased out, what was the impact of phasing out? The good side is the margin. The bad side may have been, oh yeah, I gave up the salary. I gave up this. I gave up that. Now I'm not in control of my own outcome. Someone else is my boss. Tell us how that went.
It's funny. There was very little benefit financially to wearing those hats, and none of those. Only one of those hats provided extra income, and it was very paltry compared to anything else that I was doing. So financially, it didn't hit hard at all. And so the upside was much more time, much fewer times of having to be done with my work day and then drive back into work at night for another meeting. So I was able to drop all that, um, extraneous stuff that was unnecessary, and I kind of didn't have my heart wasn't in it anymore, and financially I didn't have to take a hit, which just was interesting. I started looking at it, I was like, why was I doing that? This fear based mentality led me down all these roads that were really not making me happy at that point.
Hey guys, in case you hadn't heard, I created a completely free course on infinite banking that I really believe is the best course available in the IBC world. If you're looking to fully understand how the infinite banking concept really works, then go to livingwealth.com/escape the bank to get free access to the course. Once again, we're offering what I believe is the best course on infinite banking available totally for free. Just go to livingwealth.com/escape the bank to get access. Now, get back to the podcast. Yeah, so I would say what you gave up was this kind of this delusion or deception that says if I don't, that you already kind of mentioned, by the way, when you said if I don't take on that role, my outcome is not in my control anymore. I could be kicked out, I could be fired, like even though they're not even offering you any money, real money to like be with all of this excess work. You were saying it still made sense at the time when I did it, based on some sort of mentality that you would have had, which I think may have been how to protect yourself. And I think deep down, I resonate with that significantly too. That I've been talking lately about our strong desire to control outcomes in our lives produces most of the things that we hate about ourselves and the things that we I get super stressed and anxious about. So like when instead of just waking up and doing what is right each day, whether it's as an anesthesiologist, as a dad, as a husband, we get into this trap of saying, I have to control the outcome. So you'll have people who, you got into these positions in your anesthesia group that you would look objectively at from somebody else's point of view. And even in your own point of view, you're like, there's nothing benefiting me to be here. But originally you told yourself the benefit was going to be that I get to be in control of this outcome. And so you adopt this world of, I get to control the outcome, so that's going to be good for me. The idea is actually, no, it's not. Like God is the one in control of the outcome. Where's our true faith? Like if you ended up leaving that position, never took it, and got fired from the anesthesia group, the idea would be like, well, were you providing for yourself, or was God your provider all along? Like, are we going to trust God, or are we going to trust our own ability to conjure up outcomes? The same thing would go as like a parent. Everyone who tries to control their kids to get some sort of desired outcome out of them finds that it actually ruins the relationship in a lot of ways and produces tons of stress for both parties. So like as a parent, you have to have some control. Like you have to, like you can't let an adolescent or a child do whatever they want without being in control. So we understand that, but it's like essentially saying we have this vision for who our kids are going to be at one point in time. And if they're not going to live up to that, and this is unsaid, by the way, no one would say this, but it's just deeply true in our subconscious. We'd say if we see them going off of what we thought would be a proper outcome for them, then what we're going to have to try to do is control them to achieve that one outcome. And if you've ever, I don't have any teens yet. I just know this to be true as a youth pastor for 8 years, by the way. Just the more you try to control a teen to achieve some sort of outcome, the less likely you're actually going to be able to achieve that outcome. And you're just going to be super stressed the whole time, and so are they. So anyway, all I would say is the benefit that you gave up was saying, hey, I'm releasing the weight and responsibility of being able to control this outcome of in my anesthesia world. And the honest truth is, even financially, as you had mentioned, feeling, when you got this lump sum of money from being a partner and the buyout, and you receive this lump sum of money, essentially you were like, I have to control the outcome of what happens to this money. There's this new weight. And essentially this money that could have been a freeing thing to you became actually a life taking, it didn't add any value to life. In fact, it probably removed value from your life. Like it removed happiness if you had never even received the money. Anyway, so tell us, am I on the right page here? Do you think, is this like hitting it all?
No, you nailed it. Like it's funny how when you have this objective, this goal of just obtaining money, and you think that's going to be the big source of happiness in life. And I don't think at some level I thought it was gonna be a source of happiness, but I was like, this will be some level of control when I had it. Getting to that point made me realize all that money did was magnify whatever insecurities or whatever fears or things that you already have. So it really magnifies that rather than than mask them or cover them. So it I think in this life one thing we learn is that that level of control that we seek we're not ever able to obtain. And I think about a verse in Psalms where it like says God's words a lamp unto our feet and a light to our path. Like I don't think we get to see the end of the path. I think we see at the foot level and like just a little area around us. We don't get to see the long term view. And I think that has been difficult for me to swallow because I kind of in my head want to play that role of God and like control the outcome. But at some level, it's a day to day struggle of just trusting and just like kind of day to day following the Lord honestly, and it's a spiritual and psychological journey, and just trusting and you don't know the outcome, but you're just called to trust and obey and act. And so that's where I'm trying to be.
Yeah, me too. I mean, the Lord really showed this to me too, that if you feel this big weight of having to control all the outcomes in your life, which I think is very common. Like Corey, you brought it up, I brought it up in my own life. The more you try to control outcomes instead of just doing what is right, your focus gets skewed. You start seeing the position of God. And one of the things that I've always said needs to happen to be free of it. So as you said, create margin, move into this abundant life. Almost anytime you want to give control of an outcome to the Lord, there will always involve some form of sacrifice. And you see this biblically, and I think you see this in your own life, where essentially you had to say, okay, I'm done trying to wear all these hats so that I can be in control of the outcome. I'm going to essentially I'm going to sacrifice my right to be in control. Like I'm going to be like, okay, I'm going to give up these hats. Maybe and possibly it could come back to bite me. Like that was the reality. Like possibly it could. You don't know that. You could become less valuable to the organization, and then we get into some sort of crisis, which being in the medical field is super safe right now. Of all the things in the world, like, more and more people are getting older and older and older and needing more and more care in America. But you can essentially say if they ever needed to slim down, now I'm not as important anymore. Now they can let me go. I could just be one of the grunts. I could, there's not as much. And I might be getting older too. And they'd be like, well, he doesn't even have that much time left with us. We'd rather let him go and keep the spots. I mean, all of these fears could have come in to try to convince you to stay in control. And you just had to let them go. And sacrifice them and say, okay, yeah, I don't have to be in control. In fact, it's ruining my life. Which I think is super awesome.
And I think that's where that honestly, from a spiritual standpoint, just trusting in the Lord, but honestly setting up systems based on antifragile systems. And even this book that I read, Morgan Housel, The Psychology of Money. I don't know if you've.
I'm familiar with it, but I'm not familiar.
It's such a good book as well. And I think those books kind of shaped my mindset and helped me realize, hey, how about instead of having this fragile system where I have to work day to day to have any income, how about I build up these other systems around me where I'm not a daily cog in the wheel, but I can help build them and get it started and benefit from it, and also bless others through it, and not be as dependent on me being there all the time. And I think that that mindset shift allowed me to go from thinking of this money as a weight and something I'm gonna have to protect. And it became like a source of almost like I pushed this ball at this hill. It's a source of potential energy that now I can deploy rather than trying to guard. Like God's been good to me. How can I be good to others? How can I be active in being a blessing to others and use this if I see an opportunity, use it for that and create a system there for the new business or a new real estate venture. I can do that rather than just hoarding and building new silos. So it took a big mindset shift.
Yeah, I remember having the same exact thing, Corey, where I felt like I'd been storing up in saver mode, storing. And I was saying, this doesn't bring any fulfillment. Lord, what should I be doing with money? And he really did tell me to start to connect and partner with other people and help use your money to help build something that would benefit those other people as well. So it'd be like, hey, go get somebody that you know in your circle who provide labor and like a vision and become like a business operator. And I don't want to be the business operator, but I can fund those. And so essentially we can join forces. I can bring some money, they can bring some labor and some sweat equity, and we could build something together that they would benefit and I would benefit. But now the money I'm not just storing up to save myself. Like it could not go well, but at the end of the day, it adds fulfillment. So that's why I said, how do you overcome the love of money and building an idol of money and finding your security in money? One of the things I've found is to use the money to partner with other people to achieve something that they would benefit from as well. You suddenly start to see yourself as your money and the world of business as being a service as opposed to everything's just all about what rate of return can I get on my my grain silo. Like how much bigger can I make the grain silo? No, it's like my actual thought is, hey, I think we could get together. I could bring money, you could bring this, we could do something together. And that was your story of entering the entrepreneur world too, was you were at the baseball training facility, essentially indoor facility, and you're like, the world could use more of these. Is that kind of how the story went?
Yeah, so it seemed like a really cool concept, and I kind of spoke with the owner, who actually is a dentist. He's a dentist in Chattanooga that I became friends with, and he helped guide my thought process for creating my own franchise in Augusta. And it is funny, the as you go down the path, you learn other options or other routes to go that you wouldn't have thought of previously. And his biggest regret was not owning the real estate. So, and as I kind of absorbed that thought, I thought, well, I have this infinite banking policy that I've stored up, I haven't used right now. So how can I deploy it? So I have one of my best friends, and that I went to church with in Augusta while I was in training there, is a high school baseball coach. I called him and I said, hey, this seems like a good opportunity. Would you be interested? He's like, dude, I would quit tomorrow if you would do that, or if you bring it here. So he and his wife now run that facility and are there day to day. And we split the ownership of that business. And then myself and a few friends went and bought a 21,000 square foot unused warehouse in Augusta that was just sitting there, and it has been for sale for a year and really had no takers. And it was in a great location. And so we ended up buying this facility, renovating it, and I used whole life for the business, and and uh, and then I used some saved up capital for the warehouse, for the real estate. And now I have this system set up where I have this business that's doing this. It's been a lot of fun to work with others, and it's been a blessing to see how God's works, and use their relationships to kind of be fuel for this business. And so the business is doing well, and then it funds, or it pays the rent for the warehouse. And it's just more and more I'm seeing this infinite banking concept is not just being utilizing whole life, but utilizing real estate as my bank, and this whole life is my bank. And you're really setting up systems uh, of of systems of people and money that are constantly active, and they're not passive waiting. They're not just stocks or bonds that you're putting up and you're waiting till you're 65 to use. You allow God to use you now and be more active, and be creative. I think for me, being in the anesthesia world all day long, I'm putting people to sleep and waking them up, and it's great. And people are super anxious during that time, and I love being able to kind of with them and help people relax through that time period. But having something tangible and having this real estate and this business come alive, and being a part of it, it has been eye opening and kind of life giving to me. And to see all these people that depend that descend on this business and utilize it and benefit from it. It's been a blessing for me. And so it's kind of become full circle, where it's not all about building wealth. It's about utilizing it, growing it, and blessing others in that process.
I think that's awesome. I think what I heard in that too is that I've always felt that there's a bit of a difference between saving money and building capital. And most of us, especially with scarcity mindsets, think on in terms of saving money as our security blanket, whereas the people who are actually achieving things and living abundant life, they see their ability to save money as more building capital to go do something with. And that was a shift that you kind of mentioned, is like there's a bit of a difference between, oh, I'm just saving money, storing it up in retirement programs, all of this. It's all for me. I'm saving all this up for me, for my own security, for my retirement, for my family, into like, I'm going to build capital so that we can do something with this. And what I would assume you found out is that having this, you said this baseball coach be your partner, it makes the entire business and the profitability of the business feel meaningful because you were able to partner together with somebody else and create a win-win scenario for two people that you're now saying, like, we're winning together. We're a part of a team. They're able to be blessed. And of course, the business profitable, so I'm able to make money too. But the idea is that it created a fulfillment for you that I feel like most people are robbed of if all they ever do is have an individual retirement account. They never get to have their money produce fulfillment. They may be able to have their money produce security or something like that, but they don't know what it's like to be able to produce fulfillment. Like, I've got a business partner with our land flipping business, and that we're just now really starting to see some kind of success with. But that was my whole outset, by the way, was that, hey, if it makes money for me, great. But if it makes money for them, even better. Like, that was the idea. Like, I don't need the money per se. It would be fun to have the business work, but like, hey, if I can use my money and they can have like they can maybe have more financial freedom by, if this business works out, and have a lot of, a total life transformation for them, like, that is a big win. That's you becoming a leader. That's you, helping somebody else, lifting them up. And that is a fulfilling thing to do. And you can use your money to do that, but you do have to break free of some of the old chains. So whenever people talk about infinite banking and they hear our story, we all come into it with the individual retirement account mentality. Like this, okay, what's the rate of return? How's it going to help me? And all this. And what we actually try to help them see is we're not doing the same thing here. Our hope is to transition out of saving money mentality for your own security into building capital that can be used to accomplish something. And that's why infinite banking fits so well at the outset for people who are already doing that. And the people who are not doing that, for them to really be happy with it, they have to transition to that world, I feel like. And that's essentially what you've done, Corey, which is amazing to see.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it's interesting how having this idea of infinite banking allows you to go from saver mode to be opportunity seeking, and just kind of be more aware day to day, like what's going on in this life. How can I contribute? Like you said, contribute now versus being passive for the rest of my life and waiting to retire someday. Because I can honestly say now I'm viewing life differently. Like, I'm working less, but I'm enjoying it a whole lot more. And I don't know that I ever want to retire. And I want to keep growing and building new businesses and new opportunities for friends, and just kind of be more involved day to day. And I think that infinite banking, that whole concept has evolved over time, and really been a great blessing to my family and my friends. But as I learned more about it.
Yeah. Amen. Tell me this as we kind of wind down too. What do you think the future holds for you, Corey? What are you shooting for now? What are you looking forward to as you move forward in life? Just kind of tell me, what do you see as the next steps for your own self in your wealth building, personal life journey?
Funny you asked that question. My wife accuses me of just being this idea factory and just having millions of ideas all day long. And so I constantly have to, like, use her and some of my business partners as filters, as I come up with ideas like, hey, this may not work, but what do you think about it? And I love bouncing ideas off people and I love that creative role. And so I kind of view my future as continuing to build a capital in my policies, but not sitting on those policies, but I'm looking for active opportunities to deploy them. I'm going to scale my business to other locations, and potentially that I'm in talks right now with a group. We may put a second tenant in our building right now. So that may happen pretty soon. but I plan on just kind of seeing where the Lord leads and being involved in more real estate deals, scaling up my business. And quite honestly, I kind of am in some ways into the crypto world now. Believe it or not, I kind of I'm viewing what's going on with our Fed and our government, and kind of want to save some capital in non-fiat in Bitcoin and things like that. So I have a little bit of in that as well.
Yeah, did you buy in before the price spiked, or have you bought most of it since then?
So so it's like I've bought in 2020. I bought some, but I've kind of been steadily buying over time, and I think I'll try to, at least the way I framed it in my head is I'll continue to buy and just not sell. I think it's one of the few things that I have trouble being patient with the thing. So I want to be intentionally patient and just keep buying small amounts, and we'll see where it leads.
Yeah, it's good. actually need to get back into it. I bought Bitcoin at when it was like at 50,000 years ago, like the last time it jumped way up. And I was like, okay, this is gonna be good. And then it, plummeted all the way down to, whatever, 15,000. And I watched my $50,000, or I didn't put 50 grand in at the time, but like I watched it, get more than cut in half. I was like, if it ever gets back above 50, I'm selling it. And that's what I felt. And you realize that's the scarcity mentality showing back up. So when it got up to like 65 grand recently, I did sell it. I was like, oh, I'm gonna make some money. And maybe I'll jump back in. But I was like, it just feels like a nice little, hey, I got my money back. I thought I would never see it that day. But that's because, once again, I didn't tell. Well, it wasn't a ton of money, by the way. It wasn't very much money. It was insignificant amount of money. But that's the reason I put it in. I didn't know much about Bitcoin. I didn't know much about crypto. I didn't become a believer in it at the time. Um, I just felt like other people were saying you should put some money in. So I said, okay, I'll put some money in. And that's the idea of that I try to avoid, which is just throwing money in because someone says to throw money in. It wasn't really a part of who I was. So now where I'm starting to see the debt load really become ridiculous. I'm worried about the future of fiat currency to begin with, more so than I did when I first bought it, and even more so in the last few months, really. And now I'm sitting here thinking I should probably buy back in, and then I'm just gonna hold on to it.
Well, don't you think? I think most of us who learn about whole life and infinite banking kind of have this Austrian school of economic mindset, where from I've read a bunch about it, and it makes a lot of sense that our Fed, their involvement in central planning typically is very poorly done, and they just create a system of boom and busts. And I'm continually trying to create a system, an antifragile system in my life where I can store up and just, when an asymmetric opportunity arises, whether it's crypto or real estate, I wanna go in pretty heavily when I have some specific knowledge about a certain area. I want to seek out that opportunity now. And so I think that Austrian economic mindset, I think in infinite banking, it kind of lends itself to the time that we're in now.
I think that the founding of America was built on a very anti-fragile system, as much as you can with human systems, very anti-fragile. And as you get more into a larger federal government, more and more central planning, more and more control of different factors to try to avoid, volatility per se, as you read Antifragile, anytime we try to avoid it instead of welcoming it, you end up getting major crashes, like the end of America per se, or whatever it is. So whereas all that to say, I agree. Like we're becoming more and more fragile. Who knows when something is going to break or not, but fragile things break at some point, much more at a much higher likelihood. And if you're anti-fragile, then you have much more ability to withstand almost anything. So within reason, right? So anyway, all that to say, I need to get back into the Bitcoin game. I'll probably use my policies to buy in, Corey. You know what I mean? We'll probably be using the policies to fund it. So
But I also think just in a non-financial realm or domain is like, I think one thing I'm trying to do is, from a health standpoint, trying to focus on sleeping better. I'm into like cold plunging and sauna and all these other things. Just trying to maintain my health now, where I can be a healthy, have a longer health span and be a better dad or hopefully granddad someday as well. So I'm trying to kind of store up in that arena as well, and just being active, taking care of my mind and body now, so I would say those are things I'm also really interested in investing in right now. Is just learning to rest, learning to eat better than I was, and all those aspects, kind of really trying to grow.
Yeah, I'm not to the breaking point of the eating, but I'm almost there, Corey. At one point, I will also change how I eat. It is not this day. Just, just kidding. But it is true. Yeah. The reality is, if I can hear to kind of sum up the story, instead of working so hard to be in control for security, for saving, for money's sake, whatever it is, whatever money meant to you subconsciously that required you to sacrifice things you actually wanted out of life for security, safety, money, this whole poverty mentality. What you're saying is, hey, don't seek after that. Seek after, instead of controlling everything, live abundantly here and now, and your life will be changed. I had a different term for it, by the way, and I just forgot what I was going to say in the middle of that sentence. So it was going to be more meaningful for about 2 seconds than whenever it slipped out. But yeah, instead of living for the morning, live for quality of life. Essentially, is more important than how much grain is in your silo. That and that's a lesson that we all need to learn at some point. Sometimes it takes people a whole lifetime to learn it. Sometimes you can learn it along the way. The sooner you learn that quality of life. In fact, I heard somebody else say recently in a business podcast, and I actually forgot where I heard it. But either way, someone maybe comment, they know who said it. But there's this phrase going around called "peace is the new profit" in the world of entrepreneurship. So you have this whole group of entrepreneurship that seems to focus on growing, scaling, and that's good for some people, really, like who really want that. But the idea is, if your business is robbing you of peace, then what's the point? And is money worth losing peace? And so peace is the new profit is kind of how I'm trying to rearrange my own life from being, hey, I want to go make X amount of money to no, I actually am fine. My world may be a little bit different than yours too, Corey, that I think there's changes I would like to make that are going to cause a reduction of my income, but that would provide more peace. And that's what I'm going to actively choose in the coming years to kind of transition some things that I'm doing that I want to be in control. I want to make money. I want to do all of this. And I'm wearing certain hats that I don't really want to be in all of these different places within the organization, to finally realizing, oh, I'm actually okay taking less money for more peace. And, possibly at some point, here's the idea though, is that God is in charge of the outcome. Like I could start making these changes and make more money. The idea is I just assume I'm going to make less by doing it. And, it's actually okay, because of quality of life. You only get to live this life one time, and you only get to impact your kids. You only get to impact your spouse, your friends and family one time. And so where, having proper balance, you look at scripture and you're like, if we would just do what it says, things would be better. We just don't do what it says.
Yeah. Oh, we had to learn the hard way over and over again. We mess up and have to relearn the same lessons that we read about. I think even from what you said, when we live in that peace, I think we make better decisions which will help, even if they don't help financially, which I think they will. That you'll be a better person or better dad or better husband because you're making decisions from that peace rather than the chaos that your life can be. I think that mental space is really important. Just my 2 cents.
That's right. Well, I loved it. And thanks so much for being on the show, Corey. I guess we're about out of time. So any last words, anything you would want to leave with the audience as we close down?
Gosh, I don't know. I hope this was beneficial to the people that listen to it. But I think for me, I would just encourage people, if you're just learning, to take action and get started. And starting is the hardest part, and making, when you first start making your premium payments. At first, I thought this really stinks, having to make payments. And then over time, your thinking changes. It's like, I'm just giving from my right hand to my left hand, and I'll be able to get it back and then deploy it when I need it, or deploy it in a more opportune time. So I think my encouragement to people would be just start acting, start building premium, and with that, with the mindset that you're going to use it later. That at the appointed time, the right time, you're going to be able to use it effectively, and it's not you're really just giving from the right hand to the left, and think of it that way.
Amen. That's good. Yep. And think long range. Don't be afraid to capitalize. All these tenets of infinite banking, they're true. Like, think long range. Don't be afraid to capitalize. Put money in and use it to go achieve things. I've never met someone who's 7, 8, 9, 10 years into infinite banking who's like, man, I really wish I didn't have so much liquid money available for me to use tax-free whenever I want to go achieve anything I want. Never ran into that person who regrets being in that position at the time whenever the money could be used. And so just keep that at the forefront. All right, Corey, thanks so much for being on. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Nate. Thanks for having me. Great talking with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you guys all for being on the show. If you want to get access to our free infinite banking course, by the way, you're welcome to do so. You can go to livingwealth.com/escapethebank to sign up for our free infinite banking course and kind of see, just like what Corey's done, see what infinite banking can do for you. And we'll see you on the course.